In nights full of secrets, Shahrazad began telling her stories to the king. She spoke of distant lands, busy cities, and people whose lives were full of surprises and wonders. Each tale held a mystery and an adventure. I am Al-Hakawati, the legendary storyteller, and tonight we begin the story of the porter and the three ladies of Baghdad. Long ago, in the busy city of Baghdad, where the Tigris shone with the lights of evening, there lived a porter. He was a strong man who earned his bread by carrying loads for others. Each morning, he stood by the gate of the marketplace, waiting for someone to hire him. He was used to long days and heavy loads, but also to the color and noise of Baghdad's streets. The shouts of merchants calling out their goods, the clatter of donkey hooves, the sweet smell of spices in the air, and the laughter of children running between stalls of carpets and shining copper. By mid-morning, when the sun warmed the rooftops, a graceful lady appeared. She was finely dressed and carried herself with dignity. Her veil was bright, her eyes were sharp, and people turned to watch her as she passed. She asked the porter to carry her purchases, and so his strange journey began. From stall to stall they went, gathering all she needed for her home. He carried jars of rose water and date syrup, bottles of fragrant oils, and platters of chilled fish. She chose gleaming fruits, soft figs, and heavy bunches of grapes, along with bundles of herbs, warm flatbreads, honey cakes wrapped in leaves, and a flask of rare wine. With each stop, his load grew heavier, but he did not complain. The lady's voice was kind, and she thanked him as if he were more than a servant. At last they reached her home, a beautiful house with tall doors and carved decorations, a place that seemed to hold secrets behind its walls. The porter set down his heavy loads with a sigh of relief, expecting his work to be finished. Yet as he looked upon the quiet beauty of the place and upon the lady herself, his heart felt curious and hopeful. With polite words and a friendly smile, he asked if he might stay a little longer as a guest, hoping for more than just his wage. The lady smiled softly and spoke to her two sisters. They agreed, but with one rule: while he was in their home, he must be courteous and ask no questions about things that did not concern him. The porter accepted gladly, for their kindness made the house feel like a peaceful garden after a long journey. The sisters led him into a bright, colorful hall. Warm lamps lit the painted tiles, and soft cushions of silk and brocade were scattered around. Outside, a fountain bubbled quietly, reflecting the lantern's light. Soon a feast appeared: bowls of saffron rice, roasted lamb with honey, small birds with almond, pickled lemons, spiced vegetables, and trays of sweet treats. Platters and goblets were neatly arranged, and the smells made the porter's mouth water even before he took a bite. They ate with joy. The sisters encouraged him, urging him to be merry, and he found himself bold enough to make small jokes and clever remarks. Soon music began. The strings of an ode hummed gently, the frame drum beating softly. The sisters moved with grace, pouring wine, filling cups, and laughing together. For a time, the porter thought himself in paradise, a poor laborer suddenly sitting at a noble table. Not long after, a knock sounded at the door. The sisters whispered together, then opened it to let in three travelers, dervishes newly arrived in Baghdad. Their appearance startled the porter, for each man had the same strange mark. They were young, noble in bearing, each with a shaven head, chin, and eyebrows, and by a curious coincidence, each had lost his left eye. They wore simple travel clothes and looked tired from a long journey. Their manners were respectful, and when the house rule was explained, they accepted it without question, grateful for shelter and food. They sat among the cushions, and their presence added another layer of mystery to the night. But the gathering was not yet complete. Another knock came, more insistent. Before the cups were even filled, the sisters opened the door once again, and there stood three men cloaked in travel garments. These were no ordinary visitors, though none in the house yet knew it. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid himself, dressed in disguise, accompanied by his faithful vizier Jafar and the swordsman Masroor. The Caliph often walked through Baghdad unseen, eager to learn of his people's lives and to test the hidden corner of the city. He was drawn by the music and lively sounds came from the house, eager to discover what lay behind the melodies and laughter. With calm courtesy, he and his companions were welcomed inside, joining the porter and the dervishes around the cushions. But before entering, they were informed of the house rules, which they accepted. After the meal, the sister rose and prepared the room for a strange ritual. One sister cleared the table, removing dishes and perfumes to make space in the center. The dervishes were seated on a bench on one side, while the Caliph, Jafar and Masroor took a bench on the other side. The porter was reminded that he was part of the household, not a stranger, and he stood ready to assist. From a cupboard, he brought out 2 black dogs with chains around their necks. At the sister's command, he placed the first dog in the center. She carried out the ritual, striking it gently with a whip until her arms were tired, then held it close, crying softly, before putting it back in the cupboard. Then she did the same with the second dog. Then the sisters began another strange ritual, this time with songs and poems. One sister took up the lute, tuning it carefully until it sounded just right, and recited words full of longing and sorrow. The music and words were so heavy with grief and love that the lady of the house could not hold back. She cried out, tore her clothes, and fell fainting to the floor. The others quickly came to her, sprinkled her with water, and dressed her in a fresh dress. The Caliph, still disguised, watched in surprise, noticing the old marks of beating on her body, which only made him even more curious. The song continued, and another poem was recited. This time, it was the doorkeeper who was overcome. She tore her dress as her sister had done before, and she too fainted. The housekeeper quickly helped her, sprinkled her with water, and put a fresh dress on her. Then a third poem followed, carrying the same theme of love and despair. Again, the doorkeeper could not bear it. She ripped her dress a second time and fainted once more, showing the marks of old beatings on her body. The men watched silently, unsettled and curious, realizing that a hidden story lay behind these strange actions. The dervishes whispered among themselves, saying it might have been better to sleep on bare ground than to witness such troubling sights. Hearing this, the disguised caliph asked if they belonged to the household. They swore they did not, that this was the first time they had ever entered the house. The porter too insisted that he was no more than a guest, though he admitted his tale of how he came there was a strange one. The caliph then pointed out that they were 7 men against only 3 women, and insisted they be asked about the strange events. Jafar tried to call him, reminding him of the promise made at the door, and that dawn was not far. And later, as caliph, he could summon them and ask whatever he wished, but the caliph's curiosity was too great. After much debate, they agreed the porter should be the one to speak. Hearing the noise, the lady of the house asked what was happening. The porter then explained that the guests wished to hear the story of the 2 dogs and the reason for the beatings, and also to know why her sister had marks from whippings on her body. At this point, the lady grew firm and serious. She reminded them all of the oath they had taken at the door and how they had broken it despite her warnings. Then, she rolled up her sleeve and struck the floor 3 times. Immediately, a hidden door opened, and 7 dark-skinned servants appeared with swords drawn. They tied the men together, ready to carry out the sister's orders. The servants asked if they should strike, but the lady stopped them, saying they must wait until the truth was told. Fear spread through the room. The porter, trembling, begged not to be punished for the fault of the others, swearing he was only a simple man caught in strange events. He said the night had gone so well until these men arrived, and he recited a short, flattering poem for the lady of the house. His words brought a smile to her face, and though she remained stern, the lady agreed to hear the stories of her guests before deciding their fate. One by one, she questioned them, beginning with the dervishes. She asked if they were brothers, since they looked so similar and each had only 1 eye, but they swore they were strangers, each from a different land, who had never met before that night. Then, at her request, each declared that he had not been born one-eyed, but had lost his sight through strange misfortunes, and though they now lived as wanderers, each revealed that he was the son of a king, once ruler of lands and people, until fate forced him into exile. Hearing this, the lady declared that every man must tell his story, and when it was finished, he could bow and leave. The porter went first, explaining simply how he had carried provisions from one shop to another, following the sister through the markets of Baghdad, and how that task led him at last to this house full of wonders. His tale brought laughter, and the lady smiled as she let him go, though he insisted he would not leave until he had heard the stories of the others. The first dervish stepped forward, his face full of mystery, and everyone waited to hear his tale. It promised wonder and sorrow, a story unlike any they had heard before, but that secret will have to wait for another night. Our tale ends here, but Al-Hakawati has more stories to share. By the way, which character do you think will surprise us next? Leave your guesses in the comment and see who can guess the next twist.